This is a box from 1971. It was designed to simulate an effect that was tape flanging, which you can hear on songs like Ichiku Park from Small Faces. And this was the first rack mount box for a studio, first pro audio effects box to simulate that effect. It was designed before most integrated circuits were available. These things are lamps, so it was designed before LEDs were available. Absolutely no software, just a bunch of analog components. What's different about things in the real physical world is that they're not precise. Each of these is marked with a value, and the schematic calls out values. But when you pick up a component like this, which is marked to be a 2,200 ohm resistor, if you measure this with an ohm meter, you'd find that it's not precisely that. In fact, you could measure an infinite number of these physical components, and none of them will be exactly the value described on the part. We found out that with a product like this, where there are a gang of 8 filters that were carefully designed to be precise, but couldn't be precise because it was the real world, it matters. It sounds different if these values aren't exact. So if you do an emulation and type in exact values, it won't sound like this box. The other thing we discovered was when we designed this, again, this is before high-level integration, so these op-amps are fairly low-level integration. There weren't integrated circuits, there wasn't software. We wanted this, our intention was that this oscillator would sweep the effect like a triangle. And so we designed a circuit, that's here, to achieve that. And the triangle gets faster, it gets slower. But lo and behold, if you put this on an oscilloscope and take a look at what it's actually doing, you'll find that it's pretty close to being a triangle. But again, it's the analog world, so it's not precisely sweeping like a triangle would. Now, of course, if you gave the spec and the design to someone creating a plugin and said, hey, it's a triangle, you type some code, and it'd be a perfect triangle every time. It'd be perfect triangle regardless of the rate. But look what happens here. As we vary the rate, this shape, which is close to a triangle but not precise, and it's kind of hard to see on this scope, but this shape starts distorting. It starts getting rounded. And here it's quite rounded. Now, software emulation wouldn't do that. It would still be a perfect triangle. But you know what? This sounds different. So to do an authentic job of recreating something like that, the developer has to take into account this quirkiness.
So in creating this new Instant Phaser plugin, we wanted to accomplish 2 things. First of all, we wanted to take everything that made the original unit from the 1970s, whatever made it special, interesting, unique, we wanted to capture all of those sounds and really truly emulate it in a plugin. And second, we wanted to add some features that really took this box and gave it new life in a modern recording environment. If you were to go and look at the Instant Phaser schematic, you would see a picture of one all-pass section, and then under it you'd see some text that said there are 8 identical sections. That means 8 sections with the same capacitor values, the same resistor values, everything. And if you look inside, it's very obvious that there are not 8 identical sections, but rather 4 pairs of sections. And each of those pairs has a different capacitor value associated with it, which obviously changes things about the all-pass filter. We've created an expansion panel for this plugin, which has a host of new features that we think make this even cooler and make it even more useful in a modern recording situation. The Instant Phaser had several modes of phasing. You could control it with an LFO, or you could control it with an envelope follower. And in addition to just the envelope follower tracing the level of the input signal, we thought it would be really cool, especially in a modern DAW, to be able to sidechain that phasing. So instead of tracking the level of the input signal, you're now tracking the level of some sidechain input. You could phase your guitar or your vocals based on the drums, something like that. This is one of my favorite features of the box itself, which is that there isn't just one output, but 2 outputs. And each of those outputs are a little bit different from each other. The main output has 8 phase shift sections before it, while the aux output has 6 phase shift sections before it. This gave you options for the sounds you could get, and depending on how you routed them, you could actually get this really cool stereo panning, widening kind of thing. And so what we did on the plugin is we gave you the ability to control which of those outputs you're using by the mode switch. And each of those correspond to different combinations of those outputs. And the age knob came about mainly just because of when we were working on this phaser plugin. You know, you have to decide, okay, am I modeling this box? Am I modeling this box as it was when it first came out of the factory, or am I modeling the box as it is now? Because, you know, this thing probably, or almost certainly, doesn't sound like it did when it first came out in the 70s, and it's probably not going to sound the same 20 years from now. Okay, to do our comparison between the hardware instant phaser and the new instant phaser plugin, we've got the plugin set to the wide mode. The control voltage mode is set to the oscillator. We've got the rate set to about 0.25 hertz, and the age is at 25%, which lines it up exactly with the unit that we've got here. We've got a mono drum track going into 2 sends. Mono because the hardware instant phaser only has a single input, but the 2 outputs of the instant phaser, main and aux, are routed to the left and right channels, which corresponds to the wide mode on the plugin. So I'm going to turn this to the oscillator, I'm going to set the depth all the way up, and we'll listen to the box. And now I'm going to switch it over to the plugin, and we'll give a listen.